Hi, today I'll be critiquing a paper titled Is Cognitive Lifestyle Associated with Depressive Thoughts and Self-Reported Depressive Symptoms in Later Life? I'll be taking a developmental perspective. Research indicates that depressive symptoms are associated with poorer cognitive function and increased risk of dementia in the elderly. Further to this, the prevalence of depressive symptoms in the elderly is high, and therefore it is important to understand which factors may influence not only depressive symptoms, but also depressive thoughts, which may then eventuate into depressive symptoms in later life. One proposed modifiable factor is cognitive lifestyle, which includes three main components: education, a complex and challenging occupation, and participation in cognitively stimulating activities across the lifespan. It is theorized that those individuals living a more cognitively stimulating life build what is known as a cognitive reserve, which acts as a buffer to slow down the inevitable diminishing cognitive function that comes with old age, and can potentially prevent the onset of depressive symptoms. To date, there has been no research that has studied each factor of a cognitive lifestyle and its association with depressive thoughts. And further to this, there has been no research focusing on the combination of all key components and the effect that it has on depressive symptoms and thoughts. It is important to consider a developmental lifespan perspective, as it will allow exploration into whether these three components of a cognitive lifestyle interact to influence depressive thoughts and symptoms, and if they accumulate throughout the life. This therefore leads to two aims. There are no hypotheses stated, as this is an exploratory study. The first aim is to see whether cognitive lifestyle accounts for a significant amount of variance in depressive thoughts and symptoms. The second to see is whether there is a cumulative effect of each component of a cognitive lifestyle across the lifespan that influences depressive symptoms and thoughts in later life. 65 years or older individuals had to be recruited with no self-reported history of neurological disorder, cognitive impairment, or psychosis. Participants were recruited using a snowball method, and the measures used included self-report questionnaires and a cognitive assessment. The self-report questionnaires included the Depression Cognition Scale, which measures depression thoughts. The second is the Geriatric Depression Scale, which screens for depressive symptoms in the elderly. And cognitive lifestyle was measured using the Lifetime of Experiences questionnaire. The last measure was the Addenbrooke's Cognitive Examination, the third, which assesses cognitive function. All measures had good validity and reliability, and the only one that had a lower Cronzworth alpha was the LEQ, as it is a subjective measure that captures many experiences across the lifespan. Data analysis was done using Pearson's R correlations, hierarchical multiple regressions, and pathway analysis. Focusing on the first aim of the study, it was found that the total LEQ score accounted for 4.6 of the variance in depressive thoughts, with a standardized beta coefficient of minus 0.225. With respect to depressive symptoms, LEQ scores accounted for 10.2% of the variance, with a standardized beta coefficient of minus 0.326. Both were statistically significant. Moving on to the second aim of the study, results from a hierarchical regression indicate that as individual scores for the different components of a cognitive lifestyle at each stage of life were added into the model, greater variance in the LEQ score was accounted for. Focusing on specific predictors in the model, not all were significant, and later life activities was the only significant predictor in the full model for both depressive thoughts and symptoms. Looking at figure 1 here, pathway analysis revealed that occupation, education, and activities all interact and contribute to all components at the next stage of life, which then in turn influences depressive thoughts and symptoms in later life. In relation to the first aim, those individuals who report a more active cognitive lifestyle have fewer depressive thoughts and symptoms. This is in line with previous research. Focusing on a developmental lifespan perspective, each individual component of a cognitive lifestyle accumulates across the lifespan to directly affect depressive thoughts and symptoms in old age. Importantly, however, when considering the effect of education, occupation, and activities independently, not all were significant predictors. The only significant predictor in the full model was later life activities. This may be because later life activities were current proximal events at the time that individuals were tested and hold a greater load in the individual's memory. This therefore means that according to self-report, proximal life events have a stronger, more direct influence on current depressive thoughts and symptoms than distal life events, such as occupation, education, and early to midlife activities. Overall, the results of the study were in line with current research, looking at the association between cognitive lifestyle and depressive symptoms. The strength of this study lies in its exploratory nature. As it is the first of its kind, it importantly highlights factors that may be attributed to depression in the elderly and sheds light on the role that cognition plays. Another strength is the acknowledgement of depressive thoughts and how they can increase the risk of depression. Instead of focusing specifically on clinical depression, the authors took into consideration that it is more common for elderly people to experience depressive thoughts and symptoms rather than experience clinical depression. This therefore will allow future research into interventions to reduce these invasive depressive thoughts, which will improve quality of life in the elderly. One of the main concerns with this study is the lack of control of other variables. It is well known that there are many factors associated with depressive symptoms and thoughts, such as death of family or friends, traumatic life events, and socioeconomic status, and thus conclusions cannot be drawn as to the impact that cognitive lifestyle has on later life depression. The researchers in this study did acknowledge this limitation, and it may explain why only low to moderate negative associations between LEQ scores and depressive thoughts and symptoms were found. However, caution definitely needs to be taken when considering these associations, as the extent to which an active cognitive lifestyle is attributed to depressive symptoms and thoughts is unclear. Another limitation is that participants had to retrospectively answer questions on early to midlife activities. The general questions relating to frequency of seeing family members, how often you read, how often you exercise, may be hard to recall at an older age, and hence the self-reporting may not be accurate. Another limitation is the self-reporting nature of the exclusion criteria. Participants were required to self-report whether they had experienced psychosis, cognitive impairment, and a neurological disorder. Although this is an easy way to potentially control for variables, it could have potentially influenced the findings of the study, as some participants may have reported incorrectly that they had no history of impairment when they may have. As this is an elderly sample, it is necessary to control for potential memory and cognitive impairment, and this therefore means that a conclusion criteria needs to be stricter in order to further improve these results. What are the implications? This exploratory study highlights important issues that need to be considered, particularly with an elderly population. Depressive thoughts and symptoms are evasive and can be detrimental to the everyday functioning of elderly people. As research does indicate that there does seem to be some link between an active cognitive lifestyle and few depressive symptoms and thoughts, intervention to enhance cognitively stimulating lifestyles in the elderly age is required, but it also throughout the lifespan, which can assist management of depressive thoughts and symptoms in later life. Due to the significant limitations of the study, however, future research is definitely required in order to determine the extent to which the components of a cognitive lifestyle are associated with fewer depressive symptoms and thoughts. This will be achieved by longitudinal studies. I'd also like to bring into consideration well-being, as even though these elderly people had less depressive thoughts and symptoms if they had high LEQ scores, this doesn't necessarily equate to greater well-being, and therefore future research should definitely address this. Thank you very much.